After the party, Lucas kissed me when he was drunk. I thought my secret crush had finally seen the light of day, but 2 days later, he announced his new girlfriend on social media. I gathered my courage and called him. Did it have to be Jessica? Do I need to report to you about who I'm dating? His voice came through the phone, familiar yet strange, with a lazy drawl. Fighting back the bitter taste in my mouth, I took a deep breath and asked, if it's her, then what am I? And what was that kiss? There was a long silence on the other end, then finally, a cold laugh. Think whatever you want. The harsh dial tone pierced my ears, and a wave of helplessness washed over me. It felt strange. Like when the little boat you depend on suddenly springs a leak. You watch the hole slowly grow larger, water seeping in bit by bit, yet you keep imagining you can fix it. Until one day the water completely submerges the boat, and you finally realize some things won't work out no matter how hard you try. I took a deep breath and went to the bathroom to wash my face. When I came back, Lucas called again. Claire, bring me some pads. I can't go out right now. My heart sank. He really thinks I'll never leave. My family runs a convenience store right next door to his place. For certain things, it's indeed very convenient. But it's this convenience that gives him endless opportunities to stab my heart. Here, red-faced, I tossed the pads into his arms with annoyance. But as I turned to leave, he grabbed my hood. What's wrong? Unhappy? Playing dumb? I swatted his hand away and gritted out, next time you bring someone over, don't bother telling me. But he seemed unbothered, even pleased with my awkwardness, as if watching me suffer brought him joy. I turned to leave in anger. But Lucas was tall with long arms, and with one casual reach, he caught my hood and pulled me back. How old are you now? Can't even handle such a simple task properly. He tossed the pads in the entryway and methodically fixed my turned-out hoodie. He was standing so close, his hot breath falling on my face, making my heart pound. He was always like this, giving a sweet after a slap. Lucas, have you seen my earring? Just then, a sweet voice came from behind him. When I saw her, I instinctively stepped back. It was Jessica. This girl had thrown dirt on me, called me a freak, and even accused me of stealing money. They whispered something to each other, making me feel completely out of place standing outside. My nails dug crescents into my palms, and as I watched them about to close the door arm in arm, I don't know where I found the courage, but I shouted at Lucas's back. I don't want to like you anymore. He paused mid-step, his hand on Jessica's waist trembling slightly. After a few seconds, he softly told her, go in first. Jessica gave me a contemptuous look but said nothing and obediently went inside. That look so triumphant, full of mockery and disdain. I didn't really care, because for all these years, only Lucas could hurt me. He slowly turned around, frowning, pulling out a cigarette and lighting it. Breaking off contact again, he said it carelessly, certain that my bark was worse than my bite. I bit my lip hard, wanting to say something harsh, but found that I was indeed as pathetic as he expected. I couldn't bring myself to repeat those words a second time. Finally, Lucas got impatient, tossed his cigarette, and contemptuously delivered his verdict. Fine, Claire. You better mean it this time. Whoever contacts the other first is a dog. How childish. Making threats like we're in elementary school. But I had to admit, I was just as stubborn as he was. I stood there for a long time, my hand hovering over his doorbell several times, but ultimately didn't press it. Fine, I'll keep my word this time. In my memory, this wasn't our first fight. Compared to countless past friction, this ending was remarkably quiet. If it were before, I would definitely have lain awake at night, listening to his favorite playlist, checking his social media updates, then carefully crafting a long apology message, waiting for him to mercifully forgive my rashness. But this time, I blocked Lucas on social media and didn't contact him for a whole month. Just like when he had that car accident, it felt like another layer of skin had been stripped from me. Back then, the doctors made it sound very serious. I thought Lucas would never wake up. I couldn't focus on anything. I nearly burned down the kitchen trying to make fried rice. When my mom came home and found me curled up in the kitchen corner, she smacked me twice in frustration, then hugged me lovingly. Would your life end without him? I buried my face in my mom's embrace, saying nothing. My mom started crying too. We might owe him, but your father can repay that debt. I can repay it. My daughter, you're not allowed to stake your life on someone who doesn't love you. I nodded then, but as soon as I turned around, I snuck back to the hospital. This was my debt to Lucas. Years ago, during the earthquake, I went to his house to play and got trapped under a concrete slab with his mother. When the rescue team came, Lucas's mom insisted they save me first, but by the time I woke up, she had passed away despite emergency treatment. I watched Lucas faint from crying at the cemetery and silently vowed to live for him for the rest of my life. Originally, Lucas was the one who followed me around, but after this incident, our roles completely reversed. I followed him everywhere, accepting his mistreatment with pleasure. Later in high school, because of the obvious scar in the middle of my forehead, and because I always hung around Lucas and didn't want to join the usual cliques, I became isolated from the class. Jessica was the one who disliked me the most, but she was incredibly beautiful, beautiful enough for Lucas to fall for her at first sight. Back then, Lucas studied science while I studied arts, our classrooms separated by half the teaching building, so he had me help deliver breakfast to Jessica. Every morning, not only did I have to endure the bitterness of being a wingman, but I also had to face Jessica's humiliation. Although they broke up not long after, from then on, Lucas found the perfect way to torment me. I watched his new loves come and go, thinking this would be our life forever. Until his car accident earlier this year. I took care of him for over a month without rest, thinking our relationship had finally improved, but then Jessica appeared again. She stole Lucas away once more, hitting me hard. I must have been depressed for too long, because my best friend Nancy couldn't stand it anymore. One morning she burst into my house, dragged me into the bathroom to shower, and put on makeup, declaring she was taking me out to find a man. "Claire, did Lucas put a spell on you? I don't get it, three-legged toads might be rare, but surely two-legged men aren't hard to find." I forced an ugly smile, not intending to tell her about that long history. "Claire, are you listening to me?" "I'm listening," I responded perfunctorily, not really hearing a word. Nancy saw through my pretense, rolled her eyes, and pushed me out the door. Like a marionette, I let her drag me around the mall. 3 hours later, as I was crying into my spicy hot pot, Nancy suddenly said she had a stomachache. I couldn't spare the energy to talk, so I just waved for her to hurry back. But just as I returned my attention to the hot pot, a shadow fell across the table. Looking up, I saw a handsome guy nearly 6 feet tall occupying the seat opposite me. "Someone's sitting there," I reminded him. The handsome guy coughed lightly, showing no intention of leaving. "Hello, Miss Chen, I'm the, He glanced at a note in his hand. "Companion your friend ordered. James." My eyes widened. Hurriedly finishing my last few bites, I grabbed James's phone and looked at the order page through tear-filled eyes. "So your username is Thunder Supreme Bitter Tea. Can you really survive in the companion industry with that?" His mouth twitched, clearly not too pleased with it either, but he owned up to it anyway. The phone chimed twice, lighting up the screen to show Nancy's custom emoji. "The guy's cute, but stay safe, you're welcome." "What safety? Is that something you should say?" In front of the handsome guy, I blew a snot bubble in anger. James thoughtfully handed me a tissue, but before I could explain this was all a misunderstanding, he guessed what I was about to say. Propping himself up with both arms, curling his lips, he stared at me with innocent eyes and said, "Small business, no refunds." Then he pointed to the huge deposit on the order. "Damn, 2,000 yuan. Did Nancy go sell a kidney?" "Fine," I said resignedly after a long look, taking out my phone. "Which server are you on?" I thought companion meant playing games together, figuring since the money was spent, might as well play. But James pulled out his car keys instead. "Sister, we don't play that way." Within 2 minutes, a black Maybach stopped at the store entrance. He opened the door, one hand holding the roof, tilted his head at me. "Get in." Before I could refuse, I was efficiently bundled into the passenger seat. When I came to my senses, James had also gotten in, and was reaching across to help me with my seatbelt. He was quite close, and in the warm streetlight, I could even see his eyelashes trembling slightly. I instinctively pulled back. "I can do it myself." He didn't even look up, methodically fastening the seatbelt, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. "If you can do everything yourself, what do you need me for?" My heart ached unexpectedly. Long ago, Lucas had said the same thing to me. One minute he was flirting with Jessica, but when he saw I had twisted my ankle, he insisted on taking me home. I tactfully said I could manage, but he got annoyed at being refused and simply sat me on his bicycle's back seat. "Claire, if you can do everything yourself, what do you need me for?" As soon as the words left his mouth, we both froze, not speaking another word until we got home. His hot and cold behavior often left me unable to distinguish between sincerity and pretense. For 15 years, one step forward left me disheartened, one step back left me unwilling to let go. Bang! A brilliant firework exploded in the sky without me noticing. James had driven us to Orange Isle. Large fireworks bloomed in the night sky, magnificent and beautiful. But when everything returned to silence, it inevitably left a sense of loss. James seemed to notice something. Leaning against the railing, he interrupted my thoughts. "Claire, want to keep a firework?" I was surprised, not even noticing he'd used my first name. "Keep a firework?" He nodded, his clear jawline appearing and disappearing in the light of the next round of fireworks. "How do you keep it?" I asked. He smiled mysteriously, stepping forward, and a fresh, clean scent wafted over me. Light and subtle, surprisingly pleasant. Then I watched as he pulled a sparkler from behind my ear. I burst out laughing, your company. I mean, agency is quite creative. He scratched his nose, grinning somewhat cockily. Let's just take that as a compliment. I took the sparkler, glancing up at him. Thank you, I was really feeling down today. Before I could finish, the two people responsible for my unhappiness suddenly appeared in view. They spotted us quickly too, waving enthusiastically. Claire, is this your boyfriend? Jessica walked over holding Lucas's hand, but compared to her blooming smile, Lucas's face was extremely sour. He gave James a cold glance, then turned to me. Why are you wandering around with some sketchy guy this late? The unlit sparkler froze in my hand. I'd actually asked Lucas many times to come watch the fireworks at Orange Isle with me. But year after year, I came alone and left alone. He was an expert at disappointing people. Facing his questioning, my face grew cold too. Aren't you the sketchiest person in my life? He choked, furrowing his brow, about to lecture me. Though he was 2 months younger than me, I always felt like a child in front of him. Come back with me, he said, reaching to grab me. I instinctively tried to avoid his touch. But in the next moment, warmth fell on my shoulders as James draped his jacket over me and pulled me into his embrace. The wind made the jacket flutter loudly, and in the tense atmosphere, James smiled mischievously. Let's leave escorting girlfriends to their actual boyfriends, right, senior? Then I watched as Lucas's face grew even darker. James kept his arm around me as we walked straight to the eye-catching Maybach. Just after I fastened my seatbelt, Jessica caught up with us. She wore a sweet, proper smile as she leaned on the car window, her low-cut top revealing glimpses of what lay beneath. Handsome, I saw you bought sparklers, could I have one? At some point, Jessica had developed a habit of trying to take things from me, succeeding 9 times out of 10. I instinctively clutched the sparkler tighter, afraid James would become another of her conquests. But this time, I was wrong. No. What? She probably hadn't experienced rejection before, dramatically gaping like a Korean drama heroine. I looked up to see James forcefully closing the car door, mockingly retorting, "Don't tell me no man has bought you any." With that, he hit the gas, spraying mud all over Jessica. It was mean but satisfying. On the way back, I made conversation. You called him senior, you know, Lucas. He glanced at me in the rearview mirror, his expression neutral but with an undercurrent of hostility. Yeah, he once tore up my love letter. Only then did I learn they'd gone to the same high school as us. Though James was 2 years behind me, now in his junior year of college. Thinking of Lucas's reputation as a troublemaker in high school, he definitely made enemies. I tried to comfort him, but we'd already arrived at my building. Don't worry, I'll make sure Nancy gives you 5 stars. He seemed a bit exasperated but still smiled and said thanks, walking me up to my floor. But just as I got home, I received a friend request from Lucas. Who was that guy? I didn't respond, and after a while, he sent another message. Haven't you had enough? So a month of anger was just throwing a tantrum in his eyes. I felt hurt, typing back, you said it yourself, whoever contacts first is a dog. There was no reply after that. I waited a while, then put down my phone with relief. It seemed refusing him wasn't so hard after all. After graduating college, I became an online literature editor. The company was far from home, and I didn't want to spend too much time commuting, so I told my parents I wanted to rent an apartment near work. They thought I just wanted to avoid running into Lucas all the time, and readily agreed. My dad even gave me 5,000 yuan, saying he'd rather I pay more for a safe neighborhood. So after the holiday, I moved to South Ring Road. Nancy was supposed to help me move, but she had to work overtime, so she sent James instead. I saw you had quite a lot to pack, and I still have 2 hours left on that companion voucher, might as well use it, right? I laughed, saying whoever got stuck with my job really had bad luck. But James didn't show any impatience. The weekend traffic was heavy, and he told me to wait in the house, saying he'd be there soon. I felt bad troubling him too much, so I decided to start moving boxes out. On the 3rd box, Lucas came back. Where are you going? I couldn't describe that feeling. I admit seeing him again still caused ripples in my still waters, but that courage to go through fire and water for him seemed to have vanished forever. In fact, he was kind of annoying. Moving, I said dismissively. Why didn't you tell me? He frowned. I didn't want to deal with him, keeping my head down as I carried boxes. Seeing me ignore him, Lucas's temper flared up. His hand pressed down on the box I was about to lift, making it clear he wouldn't move until I answered. My anger surged. Lucas, do you need something? His voice rose too. Can't I find you without needing something? No. He froze. I also froze, took a deep breath, and tried to calm my chaotic emotions. Don't find me anymore unless you need something, and when you do, just go to Jessica. Isn't she the only one you trust anyway? My shout stunned him, and his voice sounded a bit hurt. When did I ever not trust you? Never. In our senior year, when our class fund went missing and the teacher was about to check the security footage, Jessica publicly accused me of stealing it. Her reason: I was the poorest in our class, and 2 days earlier, my mom had just knitted me a new scarf. She insisted the scarf was bought with the class money, and even when the teacher said not to accuse anyone before checking the footage, she and her followers locked me in the storage room, trying to force me to hand over the money. I still remember how Lucas kicked open the storage room door and threw a basketball at one of the girls. I was full of hope that he would defend me, but when he spoke, he just said, "How much did she take? I'll pay for it." See, just money was enough to easily crush a girl's self-esteem. Lucas had never really trusted me. At that moment, I gave up hoping for anything from him, understanding that I could only rely on myself. That was also the first time I told Lucas I didn't want to like him anymore. I snatched the last box from his hands. "Go home, I can move these myself." My cold attitude made Lucas's face grow darker and darker. He opened his mouth to say something but was interrupted by a sudden voice. "Quite lively here, sister. Need help?" To be honest, when the car stopped at the apartment building, I was still in a daze. James had immediately positioned himself between Lucas and me when he arrived, looking less like he was there to help me move and more like he was there to fight. But before I could think too much about it, another question popped into my mind. Is there an extra charge for moving today? I remembered their service menu didn't include moving help. Nancy might be wealthy, but for an editor like me, 2,000 yuan was a month's rent. James smiled, undid his seatbelt, and playfully looked me over with folded arms. "Of course there is, sister. You weren't planning to get my services for free, were you?" My heart skipped a beat. How much? I swear, if it was over 500, I'd abandon the car and run. He looked straight at me, his eyes rippling like autumn waters. He made me nervous. He leaned closer and closer, and just when I thought he was going to kiss me, he lowered his head and smiled, revealing 2 shallow dimples. "Look how scared you are. At least treat me to a meal, sister. I've been hungry all morning." I paused, then quickly agreed. So after moving the boxes, we went to Hidalgo Hot Pot. I have to say, being young is nice. Not only could we use student discounts, but we also got lots of attention. Of course, mainly because James was so handsome, which made me noticeable by association. People started commenting on my appearance again. "Look at that girl, what a huge scar on her head. Why doesn't she get it fixed? Who knows, maybe her family can't afford it. But that guy is so handsome, why would he be with such an ugly duckling?" The stinging words startled me. I touched my head. Damn, I'd forgotten to wear a hat. After the accident, my dad had considered plastic surgery for me. But Mom's small store didn't bring in much, and Dad's leg needed money for treatment. I felt for them and kept putting off the surgery. I hurriedly tried to arrange my bangs, but just then, James suddenly bent down. His well-defined fingers gently touched my forehead, stopping my movement. "Come on, scars are super cool. How lucky do you have to be to grow little wings?" Somehow he made my ugly scar sound romantic. He tucked my loose hair behind my ear, handling me as preciously as if I were a rare treasure. This was the first time anyone had told me I didn't need to hide that ugly scar. The girls at the next table were still chattering, and James straightened up, his brows instantly furrowing. He walked over, leaned on their table with both arms, and stared directly at the most animated girl. Her face immediately turned red. Are you talking to me?" He grinned, then slowly spoke as the girl gazed at him in amazement. "Yeah, I wanted to hear what you were barking about." The girl froze. I froze too. Her companion got angry, glaring at James. "If you can't speak properly, don't speak at all. You're good looking, but why are you so rude?" James smiled, raising an eyebrow. "Oh, so you do understand that appearances can be deceiving. Why is it okay for you to talk behind people's backs, but not okay for me to criticize you to your face?" The confrontational girl choked, then countered. "Even if we were wrong earlier, how can you, as a man, be so uncouth, randomly insulting women?" James snorted coldly. "Sorry, I only use my manners with people I care about." As he said this, James glanced at me before telling the girl, "As for you, take a good look in the mirror and see if you deserve any respect." By then, several staff members had gathered around, and not wanting to make a scene, I tugged on James's sleeve. "Let it go, I'm used to it." James wanted to say more, but yielding to my request, he shot those 2 women a fierce look before tenderly ruffling my hair. No one should define a person by their appearance, nor hurt others because of how they look. "Claire, I know how wonderful you are, don't let them upset you." I was stunned, feeling warmth flood my heart, mixed with an inexplicable bitterness. Because I suddenly realized Lucas had never said anything like this to me. Though he would chase people away whenever they mocked my scar, afterward he would only coldly tell me, "Claire, keep your hat on." He and Lucas were so different. A few minutes later, the staff's apologies brought me back to reality. The manager moved us to a different table and sent us complimentary spicy beef as compensation, and I didn't make any more fuss about it. After eating, he walked me back, the two of us side by side. He walked with his arms behind his head, stretching his body forcefully. With the movement, his black hoodie lifted slightly, revealing a hint of abs. I happened to glimpse it and blushed. James noticed my shyness, quickly stepped in front of me, blocking my path. "What's wrong, sister?" His teasing smile made it clear he knew what I'd seen. I coughed lightly, changing the subject to thank him. But I forgot he was the type to push his luck. "If you really want to thank me, go on a date with me next time." A date? There's this new amusement park opening soon, and my brother won 3 tickets. He's insisting I go with him. I don't want to be a third wheel with him and his girlfriend, so I thought about finding someone else to come along. He bent down, biting his lip as he started pleading with me. "Sister, a single dog left alone by lovey-dovey couples is very pitiful." I wanted to say he could choose not to go, but looking at his sparkling eyes, I couldn't find a reason to refuse. Running into Lucas was unexpected. Though thinking about it, since the new amusement park was known as a couple's hotspot, seeing him and Jessica there wasn't surprising. I had just taken the cotton candy James bought when I turned and saw those two at the claw machine. Jessica was happily playing while Lucas stood to the side, one hand in his pocket, looking impatient as he scrolled through his phone. I unconsciously stepped closer to James, trying to avoid them. "Claire, what a coincidence. Want to join us? After all, you've always been so fond of Lucas." Before we could walk past, Jessica spotted me again. I wondered if she had some kind of radar for me. Before I could decline, Lucas had put away his phone. His tone was cold as his eyes darted between James and me. "We're all friends here, let's hang out together." "Ha, friends." I was about to refuse when James's brother, Kevin, jumped in first. "Sure, let's go together. There's a balloon shooting game over there, we could make it a competition." His girlfriend Mia, a sweet girl, eagerly agreed. Not wanting to disappoint them, I reluctantly agreed. As we approached the balloon stand, Kevin suddenly winked at me. "Don't worry, sis-in-law, my brother's an excellent shot." I admit my mind went to the gutter for a moment and I almost spat out my juice. "Which one do you want?" James pointed at the pile of prizes. I'd originally spotted a white rabbit, but you needed to hit 9 out of 10 balloons to win it, too difficult. "Maybe that little dog at the bottom." James gave me a contemptuous look. "With me here, aim higher." "Me." Just then, Jessica set her sights on the same yellow dog. I rolled my eyes in annoyance. "Then I want that rabbit." James finally smiled, turning to Lucas with a raised chin. "Senior, care for a competition?" Lucas had always loved games since childhood, this was his forte. He immediately nodded and the two of them began. By the 9th shot, both had perfect scores. Lucas took his 10th shot first, successfully winning the prize. Jessica got her rabbit and shot me a challenging look. How childish, always trying to compete. I turned to look at James, only to find him already watching me. "Want to try?" He offered me the gun. I quickly shook my head, "I'm not good at this." But he insisted on putting the gun in my hands. "The prize is already won, what's the harm in trying?" Can't argue with that logic. I took the gun, following his instructions about alignment, but hesitated to pull the trigger. Suddenly, warmth enveloped me from behind. James's arms wrapped around me, helping support the slightly heavy air rifle. I front sight, rear sight, all aligned, got it. His husky voice echoed in my ear, and I could barely focus on the sights. "Why yes, got it." Bang. The shot went off, slightly off course. Naturally, I missed. A soft laugh came from behind. "Sister, you got flustered." I turned my head and unexpectedly fell into the stars in his eyes. Really? How could someone be so enchanting? Just then, there was a loud clang beside us. Looking over, Lucas had thrown his gun on the counter, his eyes cold enough to freeze someone to death. I knew he was angry, but it didn't seem to matter to me anymore. "Nice, absolute win," I heard Kevin say on the way back. His girlfriend was giggling too, while I pretended to sleep in the back seat. "Well done, bro. If I'd known Claire was this cute, I wouldn't have given you the booking." "What?" The companion service wasn't James's to begin with. James quietly told him to shut up before gently covering me with his jacket. Mia chimed in, "That's right, Kevin, aren't I enough for you?" Kevin made a face of disgust. Yes, 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 having a sister like you is truly my ancestral fortune showing." Now I was completely confused. So what I thought was a double date was actually one single person with 3 siblings. The revelation left me feeling like a deer in headlights. Back home, I took a hot bath and dozed off on the couch for a while. That night, I messaged James first for the first time. Even with my slow wit, I'd figured out his intentions by now. This kind of group setup either meant they were scamming me or he liked me. But with my monthly salary of 8,500 yuan, minus rent and utilities, there wasn't much left, so the first option seemed unlikely. My instincts told me I was overthinking it, that we were just client and service provider. But James's behavior today made me waver slightly. Finally, I decided to ask directly, "Do you like me?" I prefer the direct approach. He didn't reply immediately. The chat status flickered between typing and James several times before I finally received a message. "If sister wants to know the answer, have dinner with me tomorrow." A gentle threat, barely acceptable. I agreed and went to hang up laundry. Unexpectedly, the doorbell rang. Thinking it was my mom returning from her plaza dancing, I rushed to open the door. Instead, I found Lucas's extremely uncomfortable face. "My dad brought back some beef jerky from his business trip, told me to bring you some." Couldn't he at least choose a better excuse? Uncle Lu had always disliked me because of his wife's death. "Xiaoming, why are you standing in the doorway?" Before I could speak, my mom had returned from dancing. "Come in and sit down, Auntie will heat up some milk for you." Although Uncle Lu hadn't wanted much contact with our family over the years, my mom always shared any good things she had with their family. Partly because she felt indebted to Lucas and partly hoping Lucas would treat me better. "He doesn't want." "Thank you, Auntie, sorry for the trouble." I thought he would help me decline my mom's enthusiasm, but surprisingly, he agreed. He even shifted slightly to walk past me and enter. I felt helpless, not knowing what he wanted. Or perhaps even he didn't know. While my mom was heating the milk, we just sat there facing each other, neither speaking. Until he finally went to drink that milk that would probably make him sick, I reached out to stop the cup. "Mom, he's lactose intolerant, he can't drink milk." A flash of satisfaction crossed Lucas's face, as if he had been gambling. Gambling on whether I would stop him. Gambling on whether I still cared. I couldn't take this atmosphere anymore and pulled Lucas up. "Come outside with me, let's talk out there." My mom didn't understand why I suddenly changed my attitude and gave me a gentle push. Lucas was quite perceptive and said goodbye to my mom, following me outside. We walked all the way to the park where we used to play as children. Unusually, he spoke first, rambling awkwardly about childhood memories. Finally, he came back to that cup of milk. "Claire, you still care about me, don't you?" I looked up from my phone. At this moment, I really couldn't understand him. When I offered my heart to him, he rejected it, and now that I've taken it back, he's making a fuss. Just then, James had sent me links to several restaurants, asking what I wanted to eat tomorrow. I pretended to be busy replying, ignoring Lucas's question. Suddenly, a large hand snatched my phone away, his voice tinged with anger. "Claire, I'm talking to you, where's your mind wandering?" I hissed at him to return my phone, but he just raised it higher, his fingers sliding across the screen. He knew my password, it had always been the same, just his birthday. Angry, I shoved him hard, but he pulled me into his arms instead. As we calmed down, our eyes met. The position made things ambiguous. Lucas's breathing grew heavy, some emotion churning violently in his eyes. He lowered his head, almost kissing me. Memory suddenly flashed back to that class reunion night, me supporting him as we walked on the street at 2 a.m. He had looked at me with the same intensity then, placing a kiss on my lips so light it was barely there. Was the same thing about to happen again? Slap. When I came to my senses, I had already struck Lucas across the face. I felt a bit lost. "Claire." Lucas stood frozen, his entire face written with hurt and disappointment. After a while, he smiled self-mockingly. "Won't even let me kiss you. Didn't you promise to marry me when we were kids?" That was just childhood play talk. When I took it seriously, he didn't care, and now that I've given up, he brings it up again. I gritted my teeth. "Lucas, you have a girlfriend, and I'm about to start a new relationship. Please stop looking for me. We can't keep going on like before, fighting one day and forgetting about it the next. When we were kids, falling down meant just dusting off and getting back up. But as adults, when we fall, sometimes we can't get up for a long time." I admit I've backed away, no longer wanting to bear the burden of the past. "New relationship? You mean James?" He looked at me in disbelief. After a moment's silence, I took a deep breath and closed my eyes slightly. "Anyone but you." In the yellow streetlight, I caught a glimpse of fragility on Lucas's face that was barely noticeable. Perhaps at this moment, he finally understood that Claire, who had always been there when he looked back, was no longer waiting in the same place. I don't remember how I got home last night, but I slept well. When I woke up, snowflakes were drifting outside my window. James was waiting downstairs, wearing a black scarf, swinging his long legs, drawing in the snow. From a distance, it looked like a sun, but by the time I walked over, he had quickly erased the marks. We had planned to eat at the buffet near the university. At the restaurant, we found they were running a couples promotion, one person ate free. I tensed up, but James didn't say anything, naturally paid for 2 people, and led me inside. He was so different from Lucas, with that perfect sense of boundaries and patience that made me feel incredibly at ease. After dinner, James and I walked the streets. He brought sparklers from his car, and we played with them downstairs. We forgot to light them last time, making it up to you now. The soft glow lit up his face, mixing with the falling snow, creating a moment of perfect peace. Infected by his smile, I finally gathered my courage to ask why he liked me. You figured it out. Anyone could see it. But I didn't understand, including today. We'd only met a few times. With my looks, I didn't have the capital for love at first sight. I suddenly remembered Nancy's warning, Claire, these companion services are all like that, playing around is fine, but don't really fall for them. So I really wanted to know if James was just playing with me. That day in the car, I heard everything. He paused, his trembling eyelashes betraying his nervousness, before pressing his lips together and apologizing. Claire, I didn't mean to deceive you. Only then did I learn the truth about that companion booking. It turned out his brother had seen his roommates finding partners and impulsively signed up for a male companion service, coincidentally matching with me. James saw my name and immediately intercepted the booking. Then he pressured and bribed Kevin to help him pursue me. But how? Including today, we'd known each other less than 2 months. He turned with disappointment. Sister Claire, you really don't remember me? I shook my head. He dejectedly rubbed his brow. In your senior year, didn't you share your umbrella with an underclassman? You stand on the bridge watching the scenery, while someone in the building watches you. The moon decorates your window, while you decorate someone else's dreams. Hearing James's story, this poem suddenly came to mind. In his telling, our first meeting was the day I was accused of stealing. I told Lucas I didn't want to like him anymore, but then the tears still couldn't help falling. I channeled my grief into strength, running lap after lap on the track, not heading home until it was almost dark, and then met a junior student without an umbrella at the school gate. The school entrance was old then, and even standing under the eaves for shelter, he was still half soaked. Even with red-rimmed eyes from crying, you still took tiny steps toward me, wanting to share your umbrella. Right then I thought, how could someone be so miserable yet so adorable? James looked at me, his eyes filled with tenderness. So while I was desperately chasing the moon, there was a star waiting behind me all along. A few days later, Nancy showed me Jessica's social media post announcing her breakup with Lucas. I nodded and said I knew. Nancy was delighted, coming over to feel my forehead. No fever. You've really let go. You haven't gotten together with that young guy without telling me, have you? I ignored her teasing and stuffed her mouth with hot pot beef. Although James had been sincere that day, when the sparklers burned out, everything had to return to reality. I had declined his confession. Before sorting out my own feelings, I didn't want to rashly do something that might hurt him. There was a flash of disappointment in his eyes, but he still gently patted my head. It's okay, I'll wait until you've completely let go. James was gentle in a way that was impossible to refuse. My phone chimed and I checked to see it was Lucas. He must have removed himself from my block list when he had my phone last time. Can we meet tomorrow? I didn't reply. After a long while, he sent another message. Woof. My heart skipped a beat, remembering his whoever contacts first is a dog. Was he apologizing? That proudly arrogant person was actually apologizing. I still didn't reply. But his next message made my spine stiffen. Claire, tomorrow is my mom's birthday. I knew I couldn't refuse this one thing. The next day, we agreed to meet downstairs from my office. But before I saw Lucas, Jessica found me first. She stood at the office entrance, her makeup perfect from eyebrows to temples. I took her to the reception hall and ordered 2 coffees. We broke up. Are you happy? In terms of arrogance, she and Lucas really were well matched. I was annoyed. You don't need to report this to me. Who's reporting to you? She laughed self-mockingly, took a sip of coffee. I just came to tell you something. I thought she was somewhat disturbed and started to leave. Lucas has always liked you. Liked? So Lucas's teasing of me looked like love in another girl's eyes. I was speechless. So you came today just to tell me this? What was the point? Jessica froze, an unnatural expression crossing her face. Consider it an apology for what happened before. I laughed coldly, thinking this was rather like the cat crying over the dead mouse. Jessica ignored my mockery, took a sip of coffee, her voice seeming steeped in bitterness. Do you know why we broke up the first time? because he secretly replaced the missing class fund for you. My hand holding the coffee cup trembled. The teacher had said a female classmate found the money and turned it into the office the next day. How could Lucas have replaced it? To protect your precious self-esteem, he didn't give you the money directly. He bought a girl breakfast for a week just so she would help him deliver the money to the office. Jessica continued. And that day you sprained your ankle. Even though I had injured my arm, he chose to take you home without a second thought. The next day when I confronted him, I saw him steal and tear up a love letter a junior boy had written for you. Love letter. I was surprised, strangely reminded of James saying Lucas had torn up his love letter. Just then my phone rang, but I didn't check it. A hint of mockery passed over Jessica's face, though I wasn't sure if it was for herself or me. Claire, even if he won't admit it, I can see it. Even when he fought with you, used me to make you jealous, made you suffer, his heart never left you. Sometimes I think he's quite stupid, but I also envy you, having someone think about you for so many years. How strange, the Lucas in her words seemed different from the one I knew. But at this point, what use was telling me all this? Are you done? She paused, not expecting my reaction to be so calm. If telling me this is your apology, then I don't accept it. Why should people be free from their conscience's blame just by apologizing after doing wrong? Jessica, that's not fair. I stood up to leave, but just as I picked up my bag, she called out again. You really don't like Lucas anymore. Seeing the slightly panicked probe in her eyes, I suddenly understood why she had come to find me. But thinking about it, clarity was good. Yes, I don't like him anymore, so you don't need to find me in the future either. Whatever he did, whoever he was with, I wouldn't have any opinion anymore. In the dappled light, Jessica's shoulders relaxed slightly, her gaze swept behind me, her whole being seeming relieved. I was confused, until I turned around and heard a familiar voice. Claire. Lucas's eyes were tinged with red. Who knew how long he had been standing there? The car sped along, neither Lucas nor I speaking. In the gray cemetery, Uncle Lou was there too. He didn't say anything when he saw me, just made space for me to offer 3 incense sticks. Even after the memorial service, as Lucas went to get the car, I stood beside his father, not knowing what to say. After Lucas's mom passed away, many people had tried to set up matches for Uncle Lou. After all, in their generation, his stable government job made him quite desirable. But he never remarried, raising Lucas alone through college graduation. Looking at the wrinkles carved into his face, my heart ached. Uncle, I owe you an apology. Perhaps it was age making him view life and death differently, but instead of walking away as he used to, he sighed at the distance. Let's not speak of that. Claire, Uncle knows you're a good child, and I've seen how good you've been to Lucas all these years. I was too narrow-minded. If Lin Ping were alive, she would think this old man was being unreasonable. I kept my head down, not knowing how to respond. Please don't say that. He patted my shoulder, his voice carrying a broken desolation. Claire, these years have been hard on you. Lucas was partly afraid of hurting me, and partly couldn't get over that hurdle himself, so he's always been awkward about being good to you. But Uncle knows you're in his heart, and hopes you won't blame him. Since you moved away, he's been like all the energy was drained from him. Please talk to him, if just to help this old uncle. I couldn't describe what I felt, only nodding woodenly. But I knew that the ending between Lucas and me had been destined to be tragic from the moment his mother died. How could I persuade him? After sending Uncle Lou home, Lucas drove me to my building. We walked side by side for a long time, neither speaking. Finally, with nowhere left to go, Lucas looked up at the sky. Claire, if I say I like you now, is it too late to go back? His voice was very soft, but it choked back the words I had prepared. But unclear feelings had tormented me for 15 years, and I didn't want to give him any false hope that would trap him in the same torment. People have to look forward, no matter what. You'll always be my most important friend. But also, just a friend now. Night surged up and he stood under the dim streetlight, turning to look at me for a long time. As he looked, he suddenly pulled a very ugly smile. You're right. His tone returned to his former flippant self as he reached out to pull up my hood, then yanked the drawstring hard. The hood tightened until only my eyes were visible. The tense atmosphere broke, and just as I was about to call him crazy, he kissed me hard through the hood. This time, I didn't react in time. Don't take what my dad said to heart. Remember, I'm just a very, very bad person, and leaving me was right. Whoever looks back first is a pig. Childish. He said it lightly, and if I hadn't seen the bitterness fall from the corner of his eye, I might have believed those words. But I still went along with it. Fine, I'll never look back in this lifetime, you can be the pig. As I spoke, my eyes grew wet too. Perhaps with some people, if you miss them for a while, you'll miss them for a lifetime. I remember the first year I knew Lucas, my mom said he stole my floral blanket and I kicked him hard. In the 6th year, his mother went to another world to save me, and we began our decade-long dance of love and hurt. This year marks the 23rd year since I met Lucas. I watched him disappear from my life, never to return. Nancy said people should have a good cry after a breakup, but I had only felt tired, not really wanting to cry. Until the moment Lucas turned away. All the things that had once hurt me, that I had resented, flooded back into my mind, and tears finally fell uncontrollably. Much later, I understood that feeling was called regret. The feeling of knowing the outcome but being unable to change it. When James arrived, I was crouched by the flower bed, sobbing. He held me in his arms, gently wiping away my tears. "Claire, while we can't change the past, we can still pursue the future. I'm here with you, let's walk slowly together." That night, he stayed with me from sunset to moonrise as I cried. Half a year passed in the blink of an eye, and Lucas and I never contacted each other again. Only occasionally when I posted on social media would I see his likes on my updates. My mom told me he had submitted his transfer request to the provincial office long ago and flew there right after the Lunar New Year. My life was peaceful, either eating out with Nancy or staying home reading and writing. As for James, he stuck to me like glue, carefully tending to my broken heart. Today he again used the excuse of having extra tickets to invite me to a movie and dinner. My mom noticed me smiling at my phone and told me to bring my boyfriend home if I had one. I paused, suddenly feeling it was time to give James an answer. So at the mall, when he asked what I wanted to eat, I pointed to a grilled fish restaurant and said, "Let's have fish, I love fish the most." He froze, seemingly not understanding. "I remember you don't really like fish." I repeated, "I said I love chiyu the most." Note, this is wordplay in Chinese as fish sounds like James's given name. He froze again, finally understanding my meaning, and after a moment smiled, pulling me into his arms. So was that a confession? I pouted, wanting to tease him, maybe not. James's expression suddenly changed, playfully fierce as he held my face. "Claire, I heard you. You're not thinking of taking it back, are you?" Before I could say anything, he hugged me tightly, pecking at my lips like a little chick pecking rice. "Claire, little Claire, quick, say you won't." At first, I stubbornly said I needed to think about it, but later. "Well, let's finish this and go eat fish." I hugged James back tightly and stood on tiptoe to kiss his lips. "James, I like you, and I won't take it back for this lifetime." "Me too." In the sunlight, James's smile was brilliant. "I think we have a long time to verify the truth of these words." Just as he said, "He's with me, and we'll walk slowly together."